Trump claimed the economy was entirely his achievement, but Obama wasn't about to let that story be rewritten. His calm, precise response carried more weight than any political speech in recent memory. As soon as the words were spoken, it felt like the entire country paused. Living rooms, bars, and airport lounges all went quiet. In the studio, glowing with blue lights, Trump leaned forward with his usual confidence and declared, "No one has ever fixed this economy like I have. Everything you see today is because of me." At rallies, lines like that always drew cheers, but tonight was different. Millions were watching, and the interview meant to cover foreign policy, and new legislation suddenly veered into the economy, even catching the host off guard. For a moment, he blinked and fumbled his papers, unsure if he should push back. In a Toledo sports bar, a group of union workers sat shoulder to shoulder, beers in hand, eyes fixed on the screen. Rick Donnelly muttered, "That's not how I remember it." "We were climbing out of that hole before he even got in." His buddy leaned in with crossed arms and warned, "Careful, Rick. Say that too loud here and you'll start a fight." Across the country in Phoenix, retired teacher Martha Reynolds froze mid-stitch, knitting needles still in her lap. She had lived through the 2008 crash, watched her pension shrink, and remembered exactly who was president when the recovery plan began. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "That's not fair." That's just not true. The split screen of America was clear. Some nodded proudly with Trump's words, while others sat back in disbelief, recalling a very different history. Inside the studio, the host tried to regain control. "Mr. President, some economists say these gains began years earlier, during the Obama administration." Trump dismissed the comment with a wave, smiling as if it didn't matter. "They always say that, but everyone knows nothing worked until I came in." Obama had his chance. He failed. "I succeeded." That brief 2-minute exchange lit a firestorm. Twitter erupted, instantly clips spread, arguments raged, and hashtags like "Thanks Obama," "Trump economy," and "fact check" trended before the interview was even over. In a dorm room across campus, sophomore Jordan Kim stared at her laptop and quickly FaceTimed her father, a Korean War veteran who had voted for Obama twice. "Dad, did you hear what Trump just said?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger and disbelief. On the other end, he sighed, "Yeah, I heard." But don't expect Obama to answer. He doesn't step into these fights anymore. That was why what happened next felt so shocking. Reporters swarmed the story as soon as the broadcast ended. On CNN, an anchor looked straight into the camera. The president just took credit for policies economists agree began years before his administration. Will President Obama respond? All night, panels argued, voices rising, charts and numbers flashing across the screen. But no one truly expected Obama himself to step forward. At a diner in Des Moines the next morning, Tanya the waitress poured coffee while customers clashed over the headlines. A truck driver slapped the paper on the counter. Trump's "right, my business" didn't bounce back until he got in. An older man shook his head, adjusting his glasses. "You forget 2009, without those bailouts, you'd still be hauling empty trailers." The tension was everywhere: suburbs, small towns, big cities. Families debated over breakfast, neighbors whispered offenses, and talk radio replayed Trump's words like a broken record. Most assumed Obama would watch silently from the sidelines, as always. But behind the scenes, something else was happening. His advisors clipped footage, pulled old reports, and checked numbers the public had long forgotten. One aide, Marcus Rivera, asked carefully, "Are you sure you want to respond, sir? You know what kind of storm this could bring?" Obama, calm as ever, leaned back and answered softly, "If history is being rewritten, someone has to set the record straight." That decision, still hidden from the public, was the spark. No one knew was coming. By sunrise, the controversy had taken on a life of its own. Local radio hosts replayed the clip on loop. Callers flooded the lines, some laughing at Trump's bravado, others furious, and many simply confused. On Twitter, the reaction spun out of control. One viral post showed job growth charts starting in 2010 with the caption, "Receipts don't lie." Another account, profile picture of a bald eagle, fired back. Fake numbers, fake charts, Trump saved. US, period. The battle lines were drawn, and the back and forth was endless. In a Madison coffee shop, a group of graduate students crowded around a laptop. Leah Ford, a political science major, slammed her cup down hard. He just erased 8 years of progress in one sentence. People believe him because he shouts it loud enough. Her friend Anthony leaned back with a smirk. Politicians have always done that. The only difference is this guy's better at it than anyone else. Their debate grew tense, heavy with the weight of student loans, uncertain futures, and questions about truth itself. On conservative radio in Dallas, callers cheered Trump's confidence. Finally, someone who takes credit instead of apologizing. All the time, one woman declared, "Obama never fixed anything. We were miserable until Trump." The host clapped his hands, feeding off the energy. Across the country, TVS in diners and gyms looped the interview. CNN panels broke down Trump's claims with graphs and timelines, while Fox News showed him smiling, followed by small business owners thanking him for their recovery. Each side pushed its version of reality, deepening the divide, but this time felt different. Normally, Trump's remarks faded in a day, replaced by the next controversy. This one lingered because it wasn't about scandal or tweets, it was about memory, about who deserved credit for pulling America out of one of its darkest economic crises. At a community center in Dayton, retirees gathered for cards but couldn't avoid the subject. "I lost half my savings in '08, Harold Jennings said, tapping his deck. "I don't care who you voted for, Obama's policies kept me afloat." Trump can say what he wants, but I lived it. Clara, across the table, frowned. "Maybe, Harold, but my son's business only started booming after Trump got in." Maybe both are right. That was America's mood, divided not just by politics, but by memory itself. People weren't only debating numbers, they were arguing over their own lived stories, reporters in Washington noticed. In the press room, Trump's spokesperson was peppered with questions. What specific policies is the president crediting himself for? She dodged, pivoted, then snapped. The results speak for themselves. Yet the harder the administration doubled down, the more networks played old footage of Obama signing stimulus bills, announcing financial reforms, launching job programs. Newsrooms aired those clips side by side with Trump's words, the contrast striking. In Los Angeles, an Uber driver named Calvin turned up NPR as an old Obama recording played. "This won't be easy, but America will recover," Calvin shook his head. "I remember that. I remember how scared everyone was." He glanced at his passenger. "Kid, you weren't even old enough to work yet. Don't let anyone rewrite what we lived through." By evening, the anger had only grown. Hashtags exploded. Obama wilted against Trump's Avitas. And this time it wasn't just pundits arguing. Grandparents, teenagers, mechanics, nurses, everyone was weighing in. The debate had leapt out of TV studios and into the nation's living rooms. Text threads lit up, classrooms buzzed, and across every platform one question kept surfacing: would Obama respond? He rarely had since leaving office. Instead, he stayed above the daily brawls, speaking now and then about unity and hope, never directing his words at Trump. People had grown used to that silence, some even admired it. But this time felt different. This was about legacy, about truth, about who would be remembered in the history books. In a Detroit barbershop, a man getting his haircut laughed bitterly as Trump's remarks replayed on the TV. If Obama doesn't say something now, they'll run away with this lie. His barber shook his head. He won't. That's not his style. He doesn't go low. The man stared at his reflection, jaw tight. Maybe it's time he does. What they didn't know was that behind closed doors, Obama's team was already working. So when the first alerts flashed across phones that afternoon, many assumed it was fake. But it wasn't. Less than 24 hours after Trump's interview, Barack Obama, who had avoided direct fights for years, had released a statement. The timing alone was stunning. The tone, however, was what stopped people mid-step in grocery aisles and bus stations. It opened simply, "Facts matter." The night before, in a quiet Washington office, a handful of former aides had gathered. Papers, reports, and old charts were scattered across the table. Marcus Rivera put it bluntly, "If we let this slide, the truth is gone tomorrow." Obama sat with his jacket off, sleeves rolled, listening more than speaking. When he finally did, his words were calm and steady. "We don't need anger. We don't need to match the volume. We just need clarity. People remember what they lived through. Let's give them the facts they already know in their bones." The team debated wording, what to include, and what to leave out. One advisor worried it would look political. Obama leaned back, hands folded. "This isn't about politics, it's about truth. And if truth makes someone uncomfortable, so be it." By noon the next day, the statement was finalized, just under 1,000 words, but each line deliberate. He acknowledged the strength of the current economy, but traced its roots to the policies launched years earlier. He reminded Americans of the nights when banks collapsed and unemployment soared, outlining the reforms, bailouts, and protections that laid the foundation for the growth Trump now claimed. He never pointed fingers, he simply recounted the record. And he ended with a line that cut through the noise. "Leadership isn't about claiming credit for what you inherited. It's about leaving something stronger for the next generation." Networks broke into programming to air the statement. Anchors leaned forward, voices tinged with surprise at how direct it was without ever sounding hostile. On CNN, one commentator summed it up. "This is as close to a fact check as you'll ever hear from a former president." If Obama's words were as close to a fact check as you'd ever hear from him, they landed like a hammer. In Milwaukee, middle school teacher Claire Novak was grading papers when her phone buzzed with the headline. She opened it, read slowly, and smiled faintly. "That's the man I voted for," she whispered. Later, she printed a line from the statement, "Facts matter," and taped it to her classroom wall. In Tampa, construction worker Greg Townsend read the statement over lunch. "Say what you want about him," he told his crew, "but the guy makes sense. He's not yelling, not tweeting, just laying it out." His coworker, chewing a sandwich, muttered, "Yeah, but you know Trump's gonna hit back twice as hard." Reporters scrambled for reactions. Within minutes, Twitter was flooded with screenshots. Supporters called it a bombshell delivered without a raised voice. Critics dismissed it as grandstanding. Hashtags clashed again, but the tone was different now. This wasn't background noise. This was a heavyweight stepping back into the ring. At the White House, aides rushed between offices with printouts of the statement. One later admitted, "It caught us off guard. We didn't expect him to actually respond, certainly not like that." Trump, watching cable news in the residence, grew irritated as clips of Obama's words played alongside his own. "Fake news," he muttered, waving at the screen. "He's jealous, that's all," but unease spread through his team. Some advisors pushed for a sharp counterpunch. Others urged caution, warning that Obama's calm made Trump's bluster sound even louder. Meanwhile, Americans felt something they hadn't in years of former president speaking not for himself, but for the record. The contrast was stark. Trump's bravado against Obama's composure. Even critics admitted the delivery carried a weight that was hard to ignore. In Cleveland, grandmother Deborah Jameson sat with her granddaughter watching the coverage. "See," she told the girl, "that's how you speak when you want people to listen. You don't shout, you don't brag, you just tell the truth." The granddaughter asked, "Why died? But why wait until now?" Deborah smiled, "Because sometimes the right moment is louder than 100 speeches." That night, CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox replayed the statement, dissecting every line. Analysts debated its impact on Trump's narrative, on Obama's legacy, and on the 2020 election looming ahead. It wasn't just a spat anymore, it was history, being contested in real time. But the words didn't spread fastest through television, they spread through ordinary people. On Facebook, parents, Retirees and teachers shared screenshots with captions like "This is what leadership sounds like." By afternoon, TikTok was full of edits splicing Obama's calm cadence against Trump's bold claim. The contrast was brutal. Trump's boastful tone followed immediately by Obama's steady delivery. One teenager in Tucson captioned it simply, "Loud versus smart." The video hit 500,000 views within hours, and newsrooms scrambled to keep up. At the Boston Globe, editors crowded around screens, debating headlines. "We can't bury this," one said. "This isn't just Obama fact-checking Trump. This is a former president stepping out of retirement to reclaim history." In Miami, CNN's Ana Delgado stopped shoppers outside a grocery store. A young mother pushing a stroller said, "It feels like he's defending us, not himself standing up for the truth we lived through." Nearby, an older man in a baseball cap shook his head. "It's politics. He's just trying to steal the spotlight." Admiration and suspicion, side by side, only fueled the story further. In Los Angeles, MSNBC replayed clips as panelists clashed. Obama didn't just correct Trump, one analyst said. He reminded the country what leadership sounds like when it's grounded in reality. Another shot back, "That's rich. Trump's the one in office actually getting things done." Each network shaped the moment for its audience, but in everyday spaces, schools, job sites, diners, the statement became something else entirely. In Omaha, a civics teacher projected both Trump's claim and Obama's response on the whiteboard. Students erupted in debate. A boy in the back folded his arms. "Trump's not wrong, we were stuck until he came in." A girl shot back, "My dad got his job back in 2012. That wasn't Trump. Don't rewrite it." The teacher let them argue, smiling softly. It wasn't about winning, it was about showing how leaders' words shape memory. In New Orleans, jazz club owner Philip polished glasses behind the bar while muted coverage played overhead. His friend Marie leaned in. "You believe him?" Philip nodded. "I was here when the crash hit. My business almost folded. Those programs gave me breathing room." Obama's right to speak up, Marie sighed. "I just hope people are listening." By evening, the story led every broadcast. NBC's Lester Holt opened nightly news with a rare move from former President Barack Obama, breaking his silence to counter President Trump's claims about the economy. The segment rolled side by side, graphs, old clips from 2009, and man on the street reactions. The statement was everywhere, no channel, no phone screen untouched. Even conservative media couldn't ignore it. On Fox, commentators tried to spin it as Obama clinging to relevance, but they still ran the quotes because viewers wanted to. Hear them. In Springfield, Missouri, hardware store owner Bob watched from behind the counter. A lifelong Republican, he surprised even himself later that night when a customer brought it up. "I don't like the man," he admitted quietly, but he wasn't lying. Those bailouts kept half this town alive. What stunned observers most wasn't just that Obama spoke, it was how quickly his words seeped into everyday language. College students typed "facts matter" in group chats. Union leaders repeated it in speeches. Families quoted it over dinner. A single statement had slipped into the national vocabulary. Leadership isn't about claiming credit. Those words echoed everywhere, quoted at meetings, shared online, even woven into Sunday sermons where pastors reminded congregations that truth mattered more than spin. But in Trump's world, the pressure was mounting. In the West Wing, aides huddled, admitting the obvious: the narrative had slipped away. He hates it when Obama overshadows him, one advisor confided. You could see it the second coverage started. He was pacing, itching to strike back. Late-night comedians pounced. On Jimmy Kimmel Live, the host replayed Trump's claim with a punchline: "That's like bragging about cleaning the kitchen when your roommate already scrubbed every dish." The crowd roared, and clips of the joke spread online. But for most Americans, this wasn't about comedy, it was memory colliding with narrative. In Boise, Idaho, 3 generations sat around a dinner table, roast chicken cooling as debate flared. The grandfather insisted Trump was right. His daughter countered with Obama's words. The grandson, scrolling TikTok, shrug. Honestly, they sound like two guys fighting over credit in a group project. What they didn't know was that Trump was already preparing his counterpunch and the fight was about to turn sharper, louder, and deeply personal. By the weekend, the nation felt split straight down the middle. Living rooms, dinner tables, and work sites had all become battlegrounds. Obama's words had lit a fuse, and Trump's remark remained the spark beneath it. In Cincinnati, a family barbecue turned tense the moment politics hit the grill. An uncle raised his beer. Trump saved this country. I don't care what anyone says. His niece, an economics major, shot back. Saved it? Grandpa lost his house in 2009, and it was Obama's policies that stopped the bleeding. You can't just erase that. Voices clashed, overlapping, while the food sat and touched. In Salt Lake City, a group of nurses gathered in a break room, drained from a night shift. As Obama's statement replayed on TV, Maria Lopez rubbed her temples. I don't even like politics, but he sounds steady. Like someone you trust in a crisis. Another nurse scoffed. Trust, he's just trying to make Trump look bad. Same game, different face. The silence that followed was heavier than their fatigue, exhaustion, not just from work, but from years of endless arguments. No one seemed to win. Even teenagers, usually tuned out of politics, felt pulled into the storm. On a basketball court in Albuquerque, friends argued between shots. Trump's right, one yelled, "My dad didn't get his job back till he got in." Another fired back, "Bro, my mom started working again in 2013. That wasn't Trump." The ball clanged off the rim, but the game hardly mattered. What mattered was whose family's version of history felt true. The divide wasn't just between strangers anymore. It was in classrooms, workplaces, and living rooms. It was at barbecues, in break rooms, even on basketball courts. In Fresno, California, and everywhere else, America was arguing not just about politics, but about memory itself. In a quiet living room, a father and daughter watched the evening news. The father shook his head at Obama's words. He always wants the spotlight. He can't let Trump have anything. His daughter, scrolling on her phone, answered softly, or maybe he just wants people to remember what really happened. Neither raised their voice, but the silence between them felt heavier than the hum of the television. Across the country, people clung to their own experiences as proof. A retired auto worker in Detroit swore Obama's bailout checks saved his factory. A small business owner in Tulsa insisted his profits only took off after Trump's tax cuts. Each felt anchored to an unshakable truth even when their truths contradicted each other. Cable news only stoked the fire. MSNBC aired tearful interviews with laid-off workers from 2009 crediting Obama. Fox spotlighted small business owners praising Trump. CNN tried to stay in the middle, projecting charts and bringing in economists, but viewers mostly heard what matched their beliefs. In Austin, a group of Uber drivers waited outside the airport, debating across the lot with windows rolled down. Obama just wants credit for something he didn't do, one shouted. Another fired back, man, you're driving this car today because of the programs he passed. Don't forget that. A third, lighting a cigarette, sighed. Doesn't matter who fixed it. We're still working 12 hours to make rent. That silenced the group more than any chart could. On social media, the divide sharpened into something bitter. People weren't just arguing, they were blocking, unfriending, cutting ties. Cousins stopped talking, co-workers avoided each other. Even churches split along ideological lines. Beneath the anger, though, was something deeper. Fear that truth was slipping away. Fear that history was being rewritten in real time. At the same time, there was pride. Obama's supporters felt vindicated, pointing to his calm words as proof that leadership was more than volume. Trump's supporters felt attacked, convinced their president was being undermined by someone who should have stayed quiet. In Pittsburgh, steelworker Leonard sat with his wife after a long shift, watching the coverage. You know what scares me, he whispered, not who's right, but that nobody agrees on what's true anymore. His wife touched his arm gently. That's why Obama said it, facts matter. Leonard exhaled, eyes fixed on the screen. The divide ran so deep that even late-night calls between old friends turned into shouting matches. In Boise, a retired veteran argued with his high school buddy in Florida for nearly an hour before finally saying, "I don't even know if we're watching the same country anymore," and while the public wrestled with emotion, analysts and economists prepared to dig in. By Monday morning, the story had become more than political drama it was. A case study, experts crowded the airwaves, their voices overlapping as networks filled every slot with charts and analysis. On CNN, a special roundtable projected graphs across a studio wall, lines of job growth stretching back to 2010. A gray-haired professor from Ohio State tapped the screen with a laser pointer. "This isn't partisan," he said. "These numbers are government records. The recovery started long before Trump," one economist argued on CNN. Across from him, a younger analyst shook his head. "Maybe so, but growth accelerated under Trump. You can't deny that." Their exchange mirrored living rooms everywhere, where families leaned forward in recliners and argued with their TVs. In Birmingham, Alabama, a couple sat at opposite ends of the couch. The husband jabbed a finger at the screen. "See, they just admitted it. Trump made it better." His wife crossed her arms. "Made it better, sure, but he didn't start it." "There's a difference." Their teenage son, earbuds hanging around his neck, groaned. "You to fight about this more than anything." On MSNBC, anchors leaned hard into fact-checking. They rolled old footage of Obama signing the Recovery Act in Denver back in 2009, overlaying Trump's words. "Obama failed. I succeeded." The contrast was sharp, almost surgical. "Viewers can decide who's rewriting history here," the anchor said evenly. Fox, meanwhile, brought on small business owners who spoke with passion about how Trump's tax cuts let them expand. One diner owner in Oklahoma shrugged off the debate. "I don't care what Obama did years ago, my place survived because of Trump's policies today." The host nodded warmly. "Real Americans know the truth." In lecture halls, professors turned the clash into case studies. At the University of Michigan, Dr. Harold Stein played both men's statements for his students. "What matters more?" he asked, "the data or the way it's framed?" A young woman raised her hand. "Both. Facts are useless if nobody believes them." The room went silent. The Wall Street Journal published a detailed editorial, acknowledging Trump's gains but stressing that the foundation was laid by Obama. It concluded, "History is not a baton race where one man claims the credit. It is a relay where each leader hands something to the next, whether strong or fragile." That line spread quickly on Twitter, sparking another round of debate. In Sacramento, a radio host opened the lines. The first caller said, "I lived through 2008. My husband lost his job, and it was Obama's recovery plan that saved us." The next caller snapped back, "That's revisionist history. We were stuck in neutral until Trump cut through the red tape." The host chuckled. "And there it is, folks, to Americans, to truths." Even late-night shows joined in. Stephen Colbert stacked giant charts on his desk, waving them like props. "See this? It's called math. Apparently, it's a socialist plot." The crowd roared, but beneath the laughter was real fatigue for people caught in the middle. It all felt like noise. In Portland, Oregon, Sheila, a young mother, sat at her kitchen table after putting her kids to bed. She scrolled through a live stream of experts arguing, charts flashing across the screen. Finally, she closed her laptop and whispered, "I just want the truth." Not a shouting match, but the shouting was impossible to escape. The more experts weighed in, the deeper the divide grew. Charts, statistics, and editorials didn't bring clarity, they fortified each side's version of events. Every camp armed itself with facts, but only the ones that fit their story. In Washington, Trump grew restless. Advisors urged restraint, warning that Obama's calm tone made anger look unpresidential. One aide later recalled, "He paced the Oval Office, pointing at the TV. He wanted to counterattack something big." Another cautioned, "Sir, if you go too hard, it only makes his words stronger." Trump scowled, "I don't care, nobody makes me look weak." That private tension mirrored what was happening nationwide. People weren't just disagreeing anymore, they were digging trenches. For every expert crediting Obama with laying the foundation, another praised Trump for accelerating it. For every family who said Obama's recovery saved their home, another swore Trump's tax cuts saved their business. But while the experts argued over numbers, Trump was preparing to strike back, and his answer would throw the fire into overdrive. It came early Tuesday morning in the Rose Garden. Officially, the event was about infrastructure. But when a reporter shouted, "Mr. President, do you have a response to Barack Obama's remarks?" the script vanished. Trump gripped the podium, squinting into the sun. His tone was sharp from the first word. Look, Barack Obama had 8 years. 8 years, and what did he leave us with? The slowest recovery in history. People forget that. Families were suffering. Fact, he jabbed his finger at the press. And now he wants to lecture me about success? Please, I built the greatest economy in the world. Everyone knows it. Reporters shouted over one another. One asked, what about his claim that protections and programs from 2008 are still driving today's growth? Trump waved it off. That's nonsense. That was Band-Aid stuff. Temporary. If I hadn't slashed regulations, if I hadn't cut taxes, if I hadn't brought back jobs, none of this would have worked. None of it. His words came rapid fire, his hand chopping the air. Behind him, aides shifted uneasily. Some scribbled notes, others avoided eye contact, already knowing the clip would dominate the news cycle for days. In Philadelphia, a group of law students watched on their phones between classes. He's doubling down, no surprise, one muttered. Another shook her head, but notice he's not naming facts. He's just repeating the line louder. Their professor, overhearing, said quietly, and that's why Obama spoke, because repetition without evidence eventually becomes memory. Meanwhile, in Florida, the mood was very different. In a retirement community lounge, Trump's words echoed across the room. A man in a red cap pumped his fist. That's my president finally putting that guy in his place. Across the room, an elderly woman muttered under her breath, he's digging himself into a hole, and he doesn't even see it. Within hours, clips of Trump's Rose Garden rant flooded social media. Supporters praised his passion, critics mocked his defensiveness. Memes popped up comparing Obama's calm statement to Trump's animated hand gestures. Late-night comedians parodied the moment, arms flailing as they shouted, "Greatest economy, folks." Obama bad, Trump great, the audience roared, but beneath the laughter, the country felt the strain. On Wall Street, investors grew uneasy. Markets like stability, one analyst said on CNBC, and right now, we're getting the opposite. His co-host added, this isn't about policy anymore. It's about two legacies colliding. Inside the West Wing, fallout came fast. Some staffers applauded the president's fight-back energy, others whispered he had only made Obama look more dignified by comparison. One aide admitted anonymously the former president had facts. The current president had volume, and sometimes volume backfires. In San Antonio, a history teacher showed her class both clips, Obama's calm statement and Trump's fiery rebuttal. Afterward, she asked, "What do you notice?" A boy in the back shrugged. One sounds like a teacher. The other sounds like a coach yelling at halftime. The room chuckled, but the distinction stuck. Meanwhile, ordinary Americans felt the anxiety deepen. In Denver, a waitress carrying plates overheard customers erupting in argument. One slammed his fist, "Obama's a liar." Another shot back, "Trump's rewriting history, and you know it." Later in the kitchen, she sighed, "I serve food, not politics, but it feels like the whole country's at each other's throats." By evening, Trump was back online, tweeting in bursts, "Obama failed the economy. Everyone knows it, don't let fake news tell you otherwise." Minutes later, "Best economy ever, Trump economy." His feed ran hot, his tone more agitated with each post. Fox anchors rallied behind him, crediting deregulation for the boom. MSNBC hit back with fact checks. CNN's Chiron read bluntly, "Trump blames Obama again without evidence." Every frame on every channel only sharpened the divide. Obama, in contrast, stayed silent. No follow-up, no interview, no added line. Aides told reporters, he said what needed to be said, nothing more. That restraint only made his words echo louder against Trump's outbursts. In Indianapolis, a truck driver named Paul sat at a diner counter watching both clips back to back. One looks like a professor giving a lecture, he muttered. The other looks like he's yelling at his neighbor. The man beside him replied, depends what you like or what you can't stand. By midweek, the clash had seeped into every corner of American life. It wasn't just a political fight anymore. It was a question hanging over the nation. Whose version of the truth would people choose to believe? Even people who normally avoided politics couldn't escape it anymore. The debate spilled out of TV screens and newspapers into checkout lines, school parking lots, and waiting rooms. Everyone had an opinion and everyone wanted to be heard. At a crowded bus stop in Minneapolis, two strangers argued after watching Trump's Rose Garden clip on a phone. A man in work boots shook his head. Yelling doesn't make you right, the woman beside him shot back, at least he's fighting. Obama had 8 years and all he did was talk. The bus pulled up, but neither got on. They were too caught in the argument, their voices carrying into the street. In small towns like Billings, Montana, diners turned into battlegrounds. Janice, a waitress refilling coffee cups, watched as customers split into camps. Farmers pointed at the Fox screen, nodding at Trump, telling it like it is. Retirees to stools down whispered over CNN's replay of Obama's statement, truth has a quieter sound. Later, Janice told a friend, I've worked through elections before, but I've never seen people so divided they can't even sit in the same booth. Polls reflected the split. Republicans overwhelmingly backed Trump. Democrats rallied behind Obama, but independents, the group both sides coveted, were torn. Many said they trusted Obama's calm tone, even while crediting Trump for their recent financial gains. It revealed a deeper contradiction. People were caught between who they believed and what they felt in their wallets. In Seattle, baristers replayed the clips on a loop while steaming milk and pulling shots. Obama's voice reminds me of my old professor, a customer said. I miss that tone, a barista shot back. Tone doesn't pay bills. Results do. The shop buzzed with half its chatter about coffee orders, the other half about presidents fighting over history. The division seeped into homes. In St. Louis, the Johnson family sat down for spaghetti and garlic bread while the TV replayed highlights. Trump's right to Obama's just jealous, the father muttered. His wife, eyes on the screen, replied, jealous of what? He already had the job, he's just correcting the record. Their teenage daughter slammed her fork down. Can we eat one meal without this? The silence that followed was louder than the TV. Even work sites weren't immune. On a Phoenix construction site, workers ate lunch on steel beams while a radio played clips. Trump built this economy, period, one shouted. Another fired back, wrong, Obama gave him the tools, and he just grabbed the credit. Laughter and jeers echoed like a sports rivalry, but with higher stakes than any game. For others, exhaustion set in. In Portland, Nurse Joanne scrolled past the clips on her phone and sighed. I'm tired of men arguing about who's right. I just want healthcare that works. Her coworker leaned over. That's the thing, those arguments decide if we ever get it. Even churches became mirrors of the divide. In some pulpits, pastors quoted Obama's line, leadership isn't about claiming credit for what you inherited, as a reminder of humility. In others, ministers praised Trump's fight against those trying to diminish his success. Faith itself became another battleground. By Thursday evening, cable news filled the air with montages of public reaction. CNN ran a split-screen special interviewing voters in Milwaukee and Baton Rouge, one group praising Obama's steady hand, another cheering Trump's refusal to back down. MSNBC leaned on economists who repeated that Obama's policies laid the foundation. Fox doubled down with segments of small-town Americans saying, we only felt the difference after Trump. Social media hardened the divide. On Twitter, users who once followed both sides blocked each other. Facebook family groups fell silent after arguments. Instagram was filled with memes half mocking Trump's animated gestures, half mocking Obama's elitist tone, and through it all, Obama stayed silent, his single statement still circulating on its own. Trump, meanwhile, fired off tweets relentlessly, his digital megaphone working overtime. The imbalance itself became a weapon, one man speaking once, but leaving a lasting echo, the other speaking daily. Keeping the spotlight burning. In Kansas City, a high school debate club held an impromptu exercise, each side forced to argue for either Trump or Obama, regardless of their real beliefs. Afterward, a student reflected, "It wasn't about who I agreed with. It was about realizing how fragile memory is. Whoever speaks last usually wins unless the first person said something strong enough to last." But as the week dragged on, the shouting gave way to something heavier. People weren't just arguing about who was right, they were asking what the fight itself meant. It wasn't simply Trump versus Obama anymore. It was memory versus narrative, truth versus repetition, history versus politics. And ordinary Americans caught in the middle wondered, who decides what's remembered? In Columbus, Ohio, history teacher Richard Mayfield dimmed the lights at the end of class and projected both men's clips on the whiteboard. For a full minute, the students sat in silence. Then he asked, 50 years from now, when your grandkids open a textbook, what version of this story do you think they'll see? The room buzzed until one girl finally said, whichever side wins the argument, not necessarily the truth. Mayfield nodded slowly. That was the heart of it. Numbers mattered, policies mattered. But more than anything, the fight revealed how fragile collective memory could be. NBC ran a segment titled The Battle Over History. Analysts explained how different generations experience crises in completely different ways. Retirees remembered the 2008 crash as near collapse. Teenagers on Lick knew it from headlines. A sociologist summed it up, people don't just remember events, they remember how they felt. That's why one family can see the same period as salvation, while another sees it as stagnation. At a kitchen table in Dallas, cluttered with bills, Miguel flipped through old paperwork, mortgage adjustments, loan forgiveness, letters, the bailout that saved his home in 2009. He handed the folder to his teenage son. This is why I say Obama's right, because we lived it. You don't forget the fear of losing everything. His son, phone in hand, shrug, yeah. But my friend's parents say they only started making money when Trump came in. They lived that too, Miguel sighed, closing the folder. That's the problem. Everyone's got their own truth. In the end, the lesson wasn't just political. It was moral. America wasn't only divided over opinions, it was divided over memory itself. On Sunday morning, a pastor quoted Obama from the pulpit. Leadership is not about claiming credit for what you inherited. It is about leaving something stronger. He told his congregation, that's not just politics, that's life. Parents, teachers, mentors, we all leave something behind. The question is whether it's better than we found it. Heads nodded, some tearfully, others in quiet reflection. In Phoenix, a radio host offered the opposite take. Trump's refusal to give Obama credit shows strength, he told his listeners. Life isn't about handing trophies to the guy before you, it's about standing your ground, taking the win, and moving forward. Callers cheered, praising the president for fighting for his own narrative. The divide revealed a deeper anxiety. If truth itself could be argued out of existence, what else could be reshaped? In Los Angeles, a filmmaker told a friend over dinner, we're watching history get edited in real time. The scary part is whoever shouts loudest might win. Her friend speared a forkful of salad and countered, or whoever stays calm long enough to outlast the shouting. Even children noticed the tension. In a Tulsa civics class, a boy raised his hand. If two presidents can't agree on what happened, how are we supposed to know what's real? The teacher had no simple answer. That's why you have to ask questions, she said gently. Always ask questions. Both men had come to represent more than themselves. Obama positioned himself as a guardian of truth, not speaking for credit, but for history's sake. Trump cast himself as the fighter refusing to yield, defining strength as never admitting the other side was right. Americans weren't just choosing between two presidents. They were choosing between two models of leadership. In Kansas, a small business owner told a reporter, "I don't care about red or blue. What I care about is honesty. My kids are watching, and I want them to see that telling the truth, even when it's inconvenient, matters more than applause." The debate wasn't ending, it was evolving. It was no longer about job charts or numbers. It was about integrity, memory, and the legacy each leader would leave behind. Yet even as Americans wrestled with those lessons, the noise of politics roared back. By week's end, the nation was exhausted. The clash between Trump and Obama wasn't just a headline anymore, it had become part of daily life. In grocery aisles, neighbors whispered about it. In classrooms, teachers turned it into lessons. In kitchens, dinner conversations ended in silence as the subject came up again and again. It felt less like a fight between two men and more like a mirror America was being forced to stare into. What it reflected wasn't flattering: a country struggling with memory, truth, and pride. For every person who swore Obama's calm words defended history, another shouted that Trump's fire proved his strength. Both clung to their version, like lifeboats in a storm, too afraid to admit the other might hold a piece of the truth. And yet, buried in the divide was something oddly unifying. Everyone on both sides understood the same thing: deep down, words have power. When Obama spoke, it was measured and thoughtful, built to stand the test of time. When Trump countered, it was brash and passionate, meant to dominate the moment. Both approaches shaped how Americans felt, argued, and remembered, and both revealed something about leadership: its strengths, its flaws, and its consequences. In Charleston, South Carolina, a mother tucked her kids into bed after another long day of news. Her daughter asked, "Mom, why are they fighting?" She paused, then gave the simplest answer she could: "Because sometimes people care more about who gets the credit than the truth." The girl frowned. "But shouldn't the truth win?" The mother kissed her forehead. "Yes, baby. It should." That same conversation played out in countless homes, in different words, but with the same longing for honesty, for fairness, for something steady in the chaos. In Denver, a retired factory worker told a reporter, "I don't care if it's Obama or Trump. What scares me is the idea that facts can be argued away. If we lose that, we lose everything." This was never just about politics. It was about what kind of nation America wanted to be, and that's where the moral rose from the noise. Leadership isn't about applause or power. It's about responsibility. It's about telling the truth, even when it doesn't make you look like the hero. It's about leaving behind a foundation, not tearing it apart for the sake of credit. Obama's decision to speak reminded people of that. Trump's response reminded people of what happens when we forget it. Together, their clash became a cautionary tale. At a church in Louisville, a pastor put it simply: "We all want to be remembered for something. But the question is, will we be remembered for the truth we stood by, or the stories we tried to claim as our own?" Heads nodded, some eyes filled with tears. The message had landed beyond politics, because history isn't written only by the powerful, it's shaped by what people remember, repeat, and pass on. That's why Obama's quiet line "facts matter" spread so quickly. Beneath the noise, Americans longed for something solid to hold on to, and maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. In a world where volume often drowns out reason, truth still endures. It may not trend as fast, it may not shout as loud, but it lingers in classrooms, on taped-up walls, whispered to children before bed. Whether you sided with Trump or with Obama, the takeaway is bigger than both men. Leadership is judged not by who yells the loudest, but by who leaves behind something honest, something useful, something future generations can trust. And that's not just a test for presidents, it's a challenge for all of us. In our families, our workplaces, our communities, we each choose whether to chase credit or to protect the truth. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the kind of legacy we all leave behind, don't let the conversation end here. Subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and help keep this dialogue alive. Because truth doesn't survive on its own, it survives when people like you decide it matters enough to defend. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth may not always be the loudest voice in the room, but it's always the one worth remembering.